It's Sunday, August 3rd, 2014, and the reporters are taking no prisoners. First up, The Godfather. He ran the Minnesota Hells Angels for decades. Now Pat Matter is breaking his silence in his first television interview.
There's a brotherhood there, a real brotherhood.
Godfather Part 2, Archbishop John Nienstedt talks about the sex scandal and his refusal to step down.
I am able to lead this archdiocese to a better place.
Shock the world, Jesse Ventura wins his defamation suit, but has he done irreparable damage to his reputation? And Line of Duty, a Mendota Heights police officer gunned down, the killing, eerily similar to what happened nearly 20 years ago.
This was really a traumatic day. We could have lost a lot more guys, but we didn't.
All that plus the Breakfast Club. The reporters are ready to roll. And good morning, everyone, and thanks for making the reporters part of your Sunday. I'll be talking to Karen Scullen here in just a moment about what was, without a doubt, the big story of the week. The cold-blooded killing of Mendota Heights police officer Scott Patrick, murdered during what was supposed to be a routine traffic stop. The shooting sending police on a wild goose chase across the East Metro to find the suspect, and our reporters, quite frankly, were all over this one. Even as police chased the wrong guy down 494, that was something. In the end, police got the man they were looking for, 39-year-old Brian Fitch Sr., a man with a very, very long rap sheet. Joining us, our own Karen Scullen. You were, my friend, all over this story, on Twitter, everything else. Charges coming down Friday. Apparently pretty incriminating, some of the things in these charges. Tell me what you said.
Yeah, both the charges came down from Ramsey County and Dakota County. Dakota County, obviously, where he shot, allegedly, Officer Patrick, and then Ramsey County, where he allegedly shot at the officers. I think the big headline out of this is apparently, in the documents, it's saying that when Brian Fitch got to the hospital, he says to the officer who is guarding him, hey, just so you know, I hate cops and I'm guilty.
That sounds like a confession, or about as close as I can imagine anyone coming.
Right.
I mean, his attorney, when he gets one, will probably argue to throw that out in court, but it was a spontaneous utterance. Usually they allow those in. Anything else? Any other surprises that we learned in the charges?
Well, I think we were talking about how many times the suspect was shot. We now know it's 8 times, or about 8 times, 7, 8 times. And then also where Officer Patrick was shot, it looks like he was shot 3 times in the leg, the abdomen, and the head, and that, of course, is what led to his death. There
were several scenes here. Obviously, West St. Paul, moving into St. Paul. You were following this kind of rotating manhunt, and you were on top of it. Tell me what it was like there on the ground. It must have been just chaos.
It was chaos. I mean, you know, there were obviously 2 different scenes. The first scene was where they found his car, his original car he was in, the green Pontiac Grand Am we kept hearing about, dumped over on Roberts Street in St. Paul. Huge crowds gathering around as cops blocked off several blocks, a huge area surrounding this house, not really knowing whether he was in there or not. And what was interesting is talk to some of the folks around there. You know, obviously crowds, the neighborhood gathering, and then every once in a while somebody would come along who had some kind of connection to either him or this case. First woman who came upon me was talking, her 1-year-old son was in this duplex where they thought this guy was at.
Wow.
Yeah, he was upstairs with his grandma. She was obviously scared to death. They got them out safely. And ultimately, we knew at about 8 o'clock that he was probably not in there because all the cops blew the scene. I mean, they were heading to Rice and Sycamore, where ultimately we now know everything went down.
Great. Well, great job out there. Really appreciate it. Fantastic coverage, both social media-wise and on air. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Karen.
You bet.
Well, if all this seemed a little like deja vu, it was nearly 20 years ago and about 3 miles away that St. Paul police officer Ron Ryan Jr. was killed while checking on a vehicle in a church parking lot. Officer Tim Jones and his canine laser were also killed during the search for that suspect, Guy Baker. It was an intensive house-by-house search that in so many ways was eerily similar to the one this week. Some of those same officers involved in the search this week as well. Well, another big story this week, Archbishop John Nienstedt breaking his silence on the sex abuse scandal, saying that despite calls from the editorial pages of the New York Times, the Star Tribune, and who knows how many of the followers of the Catholic Church, he has no intention of stepping down. Take a listen.
We have done the work. We are in a better place, and I would hope that people would place their trust in us because I think we deserve it.
But you acknowledge that these words have been said before.
I recognize that, yes.
In a series of 20-minute interviews with the media, Nienstedt tried to change the narrative of the story from sex abuse scandal happening right now in real time to something that's already been dealt with. It's in the past. But really, the most interesting part of our sit-down interview was something that ended up on the editing room floor because it got a little bit off topic. But in a way, this kind of unedited footage may be a microcosm of everything else. Take a listen.
Are you gay or are you homosexual?
No, I am not. But at the same time, I want to say that I'm not against gays. I look at all individuals as children of God, and they deserve the respect and the dignity of their personhood.
That's not what you said about Brokeback Mountain, though. The movie. You came out pretty strongly about that being an immoral movie.
I was critical of the movie, yes. I don't know that I used the word immoral.
Actually, it was worse than that. Back in 2006, when Nienstedt was Bishop of New Ulm, he warned parishioners about the Oscar-winning film, saying Hollywood producers, quote, have turned their backs on God in their quest to make evil look so attractive. And yet it's Nienstedt who's now the subject of an outside investigation, one he authorized, into whether he engaged in sexual misconduct with adult male seminarians and priests, reportedly stemming from his time in Detroit, something he denies. Now here's where it gets interesting.
Sex is meant to take place within the context of a committed married relationship between a man and a woman.
Okay. What about homosexuals?
Homosexuals need to lead chaste lives.
They need to lead celibate lives.
Well, yes.
Okay. Does that seem reasonable to you that we should all lead the lives of priests?
Well,
Why? Tell me, Archbishop, why should I lead the life of a priest?
because it is of your nature to express yourself sexually through a committed relationship.
I am.
Between a man and woman.
I've been with the same partner and husband now for 21 years.
Archbishop,
It's at this point the Archdiocese's new PR person, Ann Steffen, steps in. After the interview, she tells me I made it too personal. When I told her I was Catholic, she told me I had an agenda. And that pretty much sums up the PR strategy. Discredit the critics, shift the conversation. Fact is, the Archdiocese always wants to talk about controversies in the abstract, whether it's sex abuse or gay marriage. And you can't help wondering if that's part of the problem.
Wild guess. I don't think he's going to be sitting down with me anytime soon, but that's okay. So from the holy to the hellish, Pat Matter is a man I never dreamed I would actually get the chance to interview. Most folks who know him personally or by reputation will be stunned that he's going in front of a television camera for the very first time. But the former leader of Minnesota's Hells Angels has one hell of a story to tell, and he did it with the help of a cop who helped lock him up.
Pat Matter was the undisputed godfather of the Minnesota Hells Angels, ruling over the methamphetamine trade for decades from the Angels Clubhouse on Washington Avenue. That is until 10 years ago, when Matter did the unthinkable. He broke the code and snitched on his fellow Angels.
To be a Hell's Angel, it's all about the code, isn't it?
It is. And the code is the big thing.
Matter is now telling his story with the help of an unlikely co-author,
We butted heads a lot.
Chris Omott, a former Hennepin County deputy who helped put him away.
Well, Pat would always accuse me of investigating him further because I would talk to him like a cop and, you know, like I'm investigating him, but I'm trying to get the story and so we can put it down on paper and stuff.
Breaking the code is hardly light reading. It lays out the drugs, the sex, and raw brutality of life in the Hells Angels in vivid detail. Matter has a nearly photographic memory. But for Matter, it came to an end when he was indicted and convicted of distributing 2 kilos of cocaine. Looking at a life sentence, he cut a deal. In return for testifying against his fellow Angels, he'd get 7 years taken off his sentence. He did 9 years behind bars at an undisclosed location.
It was the hardest thing I ever did to cooperate. And to help make that decision, you know, I guess my family. I just wasn't ready to lose my family.
But Omott discovered that being a Hells Angels also involved a certain amount of bluster and bravado, like the filthy few patch, a kind of merit badge for murder.
When you start adding up the numbers of all the Hells Angels out there with filthy few patches, the numbers don't add up. A lot of it is flash. Some might be real, some might not, but I mean, it's flash, and it's all about the image they're portraying to people within their club, to people in other clubs. It's their way of showing that they're the baddest of the bad.
You've never been involved in a homicide.
No,
You've never ordered a homicide.
no.
Chris?
Well, he never really ordered one. He gave permission to shoot an outlaw once upon a time. That's in the book.
Okay.
And I'll let Pat address that, though.
That's correct. There was talk about Pete Rogers from the Chicago Outlaws, and I give the go-ahead to go ahead. And if they had an opportunity to come around, they were supposed to take care of it. You want people to think you're capable of doing whatever it takes in that situation, especially when you're surrounded by another motorcycle club.
Because you got out of more fights than you got in just by making people think that you were tough.
That's exactly it.
The Godfather and cop alternating chapters from their own perspective, a kind of fact-checking. The narrative also tracking the development of a unique friendship between the Con and the son of a former sheriff.
We have talked thousands of hours since he's been out of prison. And when Pat went to prison, he asked me if I would look after his wife and child. I think the greatest reward for a law enforcement officer is to see someone truly turn their life around. And I truly believe that Pat has turned his life around.
But Matter's cooperation with law enforcement has come at a price. From all accounts, he is now a marked man. The Hells Angels making that perfectly clear when they blacked out his face on a clubhouse mural.
How much of your life today is looking over your shoulder?
I'm pretty comfortable with who I am. I've had to do that my whole life, so I'm okay with it. I wrote this book to tell my story, not to bash the Hells Angels, not to bash law enforcement. It was just the life I lived, and I wanted to tell my story. That was the bottom line. That's why I wrote this book.
Breaking the Code, already a bestseller now on Amazon. So the first American to die from Ebola was a Minnesota man from Brooklyn Park, and now the U.S. is issuing travel warnings for West Africa. Patrick Sawyer worked for the Liberian government and caught the disease while caring for his sick sister there. He actually died in Nigeria after traveling there for business. His wife says he was planning to return to Minnesota in just a couple weeks.
Rick was definitely coming to the United States after he was through with Nigeria. He was coming to the United States for the girls' birthday party.
Some 30,000 Liberians call Brooklyn Park home. As precaution, first responders will now wear eye shield and face masks when dealing with people there with flu-like symptoms. Some facts here. You can only catch Ebola if you have direct contact with bodily fluids. A person is only infectious if they're already sick. But here's the scary part. The incubation period for Ebola from exposure to sickness can be from 3 to 21 days, making air travel a real concern here. Well, after the break, the Breakfast Club is here. We are talking Ventura, gay marriage, and the Archbishop. We'll be right back.
No real winners through this process because he did have to listen to these young SEALs say all of these terrible things about him. And there's probably a lot more people like them out there in the SEAL community.
In the days and weeks to come, we will be evaluating all of our legal options. Taya Kyle wants me to let you know that she intends to continue Chris Kyle's legacy of commitment to country, to family, and to God.
Lawyers for both sides there following the Jesse Ventura defamation verdict, the jury awarding Ventura $1.8 million. All this because former Navy SEAL Chris Kyle wrote in his book, American Sniper, he punched out Ventura in a bar fight in 2006. Ventura said none of it was true, and the passage in the book damaged his reputation in an 8-2 split decision, the jury siding there with Ventura. The Breakfast Club this morning includes former Senate Majority Leader Amy Koch, right here to my left, along with Jake Lesh, formerly of Minnesotans United, who is still working on the gay marriage issue nationally. We will talk about that, and Aaron Rupar of City Pages. So Ventura has a new podcast. He's moving on. He was also seen on a golf course right after that verdict, looking very nice, very summer, looking like a one-percenter, actually. This award, $1.8 million, is now part of his narrative, now part of his story. Aaron, does that hurt him and hurt his reputation? Does he come out of this worse, do you think?
Oh, I'm sure he looks worse, in the public eye, but you got to give credit to his lawyers for being able to prove that something didn't happen, which I would imagine is very hard to do. But certainly when you're, engaged in a legal battle with someone's widow, it's hard PR-wise to think that you're coming out ahead there. But, if he was defamed, and that's his right to pursue damages. And I guess the jury thought that, he made his case effectively.
Yeah, I don't know where his reputation is right now. I know he says it's restored. I don't exactly know what people thought of him to begin with before this trial even took place. But you got to play the devil's advocate. If this stuff didn't happen, I I'd probably want to clear my name too. And so I don't claim to know the answers, but you got to give him some credit.
Well, and I read a story after that it was really not so much about the punch. I mean, that's what the story seemed like. He was, that he got punched out, but it was really that he made a statement basically that more of y'all should be.
The SEALs deserve to lose a few. That was the statement.
Right. And of course, I mean, I can understand why that would be something that you would certainly not to think that you would wish American heroes lost.
Right.
I mean, that is damaging.
That was his group. He was a SEAL.
But suing the widow.
Right.
Is,
Right.
But Amy, you've worked with him. You know he can say, and certainly post-career, he has said a lot more crazy things in terms of America being a fascist country, etc. But some people thought the statement seemed plausible given his history of what he has said. Let me ask you, do you think if he gives some of this money away, he comes out ahead if he gave it to charity, to the troops?
Yeah, I'd love to see him do something with veterans. If I were advising, and actually I didn't get to work with Ventura. I came a little bit after him, but that's what I was thinking. What about going to the VA hospitals? What about talking to yellow ribbon people and finding a way to give back? Because if truly this was about that statement and being defamed on saying that, then take some of this money and put it to some good.
Well, and you wonder how much of it with him is an ego thing too. I mean, this is a guy who made his reputation in wrestling, being a tough guy. So to have someone write a book that's very popular alleging that he punched you out, maybe some of it is ego that he just felt like he couldn't let that stand without trying to correct the record at least.
Let's talk gay marriage. It has been exactly 1 year since gay marriage became legal in Minnesota. Nearly 4,000 same-sex couples have gotten married. In Hennepin County, it's now running about 1 in 5. Jake, you were instrumental in this fight. Where do we stand right now? You're now working in Kentucky to try to get gay marriage.
Yeah, I'm doing some work in the South with a Freedom to Marry national organization now. I think for the state of Minnesota, this it's been decided. People had the chance to talk about it for years. The state really had a very honest, open dialogue about what we thought about marriage, how we defined it, and who should have access to it. And ultimately, I'm proud of the work we did, and I think we ended at a good place. And Minnesota, ultimately, I think, really was sort of a turning point nationally. We were the fulcrum, and along with some of those other states in 2012, when we had our amendment fight, I think it really was. The rest has sort of tumbled from there.
Yeah, we were the 13, 6 others have followed. Yes, Eric?
Yeah, there was polling that was done just a few months ago that actually indicated the split in Minnesota is pretty much exactly as it was 2 years ago. But it is notable that all 4 candidates running as Republicans in the gubernatorial race have said that they would not revisit this issue if they were elected. Part of that is that the Senate, of course, is going to be controlled by the DFL for the next 2 years, so they wouldn't be sympathetic anyway. But it does seem like among Republicans there is a desire to move past this.
And I think so. And I always my view from the Republican Party standpoint has been there's somewhat of a generational gap in this. There's a younger crew of Republicans coming in where this is just simply not an issue. But I think for Minnesotans at large, it was such a long conversation, so several years where we debated and discussed, and now 1 year later, it's been decided, and the people just seem ready to okay, move on. We've had that conversation.
Do you think are Republicans done with this as an issue? Because when it got on the ballot, I remember you were involved in getting it on the ballot. People thought it would drive Republicans to the polls. It didn't do that. Are Republicans done with this? Is this now a radioactive topic?
Yeah, I really do think, and as Aaron pointed out, the 4 GOP governors candidates are simply saying this is the law. The people voted. The people had their input, and it's done.
And that's in a primary.
I think that is right, and that's in a GOP primary. Mostly what I hear is media speaking about it now. I don't hear a lot of Minnesotans talking about it. It's been decided.
The Pioneer Press headline this morning read 1 year of same-sex marriage, more love, more happiness. I think that's really what it's about. You've got couples who are happy and married, and they have what they, in my opinion, deserve and all they wanted. And it's done.
Someone who may not still be happy is Archbishop John Nienstedt. The church gave $650,000 to this fight. Let me ask you a couple questions. I don't think the Catholic Church is done with this yet. How much time does Nienstedt have? You just heard him right there. He's not stepping down. What do we think his trajectory is?
What would it take at this point for him to lose his job? I mean,
phone call from the Pope, apparently.
Apparently, and there have been, I've heard rumors that he offered his resignation at one point and it wasn't accepted. I don't know if that's true or not, but, you just wonder at this point with all of the debacles that we've seen over the past couple of years with the local Catholic Church especially, what would it take? I mean, he's been himself implicated in, these are allegations, so I'm not sure if they're true or not, but he has been allegedly involved in homosexual relationships, some of which were questionable in terms of, the people that he was involved with. So I don't know what it would take at this point.
Yeah, I want to clarify one thing. I don't think it's so much relationships as it is allegations of misconduct. In other words, they may have made the move on someone.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to venture to talk about his personal life, but I think, you know, we heard earlier him asking for parishioners and for Minnesotans to put their trust in the Archdiocese, and as a Catholic, that's pretty hard. You know, it's a pretty hard thing to see this the church that I know and that I love and that you know, go to Mass, to see it be dragged through the mud like this, and I just think that the healing that the church needs and that parishioners and Catholics across the state need is not going to come under the leadership of the Archbishop.
No, and it's interesting, Catholic, I'm not sure.
I was confirmed Catholic.
Confirmed
I would not
Catholic.
identify as a Catholic.
That means we all have agendas, by the way.
No, actually, we all have a concern. And actually, one of the names on the list came from my home parish. And I remember I was in grade school at the time when he was removed. And I remember the difficulty. I remember the arguments. I didn't know why there was this problem with this priest, but we knew he had to go.
We have to go too. We're back with On the Record in a sec. It's time to go on the record about Mark Carney. You probably don't know him, but an awful lot of us around here do. He's an engineer here at Fox 9 who is retired on Friday after 45 years here at KMSP. I find that mind-boggling for many reasons, but not least of all because of all the technological changes he's witnessed. Really the dawn of television news, from film to tape and now high-def digital video. Carney's father, Joe, was actually program director here and a former engineer back when we signed on in 1954, when we were KEYD operating out of the Fauché. Late Harry Reasoner, right there, was our anchor back then. Mark's departure reminds us and reminds me that we are nothing without the people who keep us on the air. And too often we take that for granted. Hey kids, you may not know this, and they would never admit this, but the FCC would love to have our signal bandwidth and sell it to the wireless companies. They've already made billions doing just that. So it's more important than ever for us broadcasters to serve the public interest and necessity. And one day when the internet crashes, a meteor strikes, or whatever, we may truly appreciate free over-the-air television. And grateful to the folks like Mark Carney who help keep that signal strong. That's the reporters for this Sunday. We hope you join us next Sunday. And until then, check us out on our website. Thanks to all of our guests. We'll see you back here next week.